How Mise en scène has progressed from our preliminary task to our final product. In terms of costume, in our preliminary task, in Hidden, we immediately recognised the utility of engaging in character exposition through costume. For example, the policeman's suit connotes power and authority, with his glasses also connoting intelligence and therefore superiority, whereas the grey hoodie of the arrested has connotations of crime. However, in our final task, there is clear progression apparent. Similarly, iconographic costume was used, which was partly inspired by costume from the film House of a Thousand Corpses, which was directed by Rob Zombie, whereby a white coat, dust mask and gloves has meticulous connotations as well as connoting authority. This meant that costume reinforced our concept to a much larger extent in our final product in comparison to our preliminary task. In terms of props, the importance of props was recognised in our preliminary task in two ways. Props are defined as aspects of the set which are used and touched by actors. Firstly, our Wilderness Woods task was highly dependent upon props, with the mushrooms forming the crux of our piece. Secondly, in Hidden, we recognised the utility of props in terms of character exposition. For example, our makeshift handcuffs reaffirmed the nature of the antagonist. Our use of props, however, in our final product was more vital in revealing the nature of the character than in our preliminary task. This is apparent in a number of shots. A few examples are as follows: the scalpel revealing attention to detail and meticulousness, the tracking shot of the knives in the final sequence confirming the insane nature of the antagonist. Amongst these two, there are many more examples which prove large progression in terms of props, and a key aspect of mise en scène. In terms of location, our preliminary task, with the police style in Hidden occurring in a stock location, and our Wilderness Woods task being a typical stock location, adopted in many horror films, such as The Blair Witch Project, directed by Sanchez and Myrick, were both generic in terms of location. However, these preliminary tasks allowed us to realise stock locations are generally overly tedious and generic, which is why we came up with the idea of the location being a greenhouse. Lastly, in terms of framing composition, we have progressed a lot. Due to our novice filmmaking skills in our preliminary tasks and a lack of planning in comparison to our final product, the composition of our shots often included objects which retracted from the viewer's attention. For example, in terms of titles, the positioning of the title Hidden was very poor. However, there is large progression, and it is definite that we learned from this, as in our final film we took great care over what was in shot, ensuring that the framing reinforced our concept and character exposition. Moreover, in terms of titling positioning, we utilised the rule of 2/3 to concentrate attention on titles, and used After Effects and Photoshop to ensure that the titles were interpreted as being integrated into the shot. This is also an example of where extensive planning, involving studying the use of titles in other films, such as Napoleon Dynamite and its diegetic titles, meant our piece was much more proficient than our preliminary tasks. Overall, I believe it is clear that huge developments have occurred from our preliminary tasks to our final film opening, which has a direct correlation with increasing knowledge surrounding aspects of mise en scène, as well as the extent of planning we engaged in. For example, storyboarding was also important in ensuring framing composition and ensuring that it was effective.